A wealthy billionaire CEO comforts crying toddler on the bus. Shocked TO discovered the child as his Marcus had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. But he convinced himself that success was the only currency worth having. The youngest billionaire in America adjusted his platinum cufflinks while studying a holographic display showing Blackwell Industries' global empire. Construction, technology, entertainment, all under his iron grip. When you can purchase anything, why would you need anyone? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. 23-year-old Marcus Blackwell stood in his glass-walled office 40 floors above Silicon Valley, his signature bright blue Armani suit reflecting the morning sun. The youngest billionaire in America adjusted his platinum cufflinks while studying a holographic display showing Blackwell Industries' global empire. Construction, technology, entertainment, all under his iron grip. "Sir, the Henderson Group just agreed to our terms," his assistant announced through the intercom. Marcus smiled coldly. Henderson Group had been a family business for 3 generations. Now it belonged to him. Excellent. Send the termination letters to their entire executive team. We don't need their sentiment, just their assets. He touched the massive window overlooking the city he was systematically conquering. Every building, every deal, every victory fed his insatiable hunger for control. At 21, when his father died in that helicopter crash, Marcus had inherited a struggling construction company drowning in debt. 24 months later, he commanded a multi-billion-dollar empire that made grown men tremble. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Another contract lost. Phoenix Development chosen over us again. Strategic planning. Marcus's jaw clenched. For 6 months, some phantom competitor had been stealing his deals, winning contracts that should have been impossible to secure. Every time Blackwell Industries bid on a project, this ghost company appeared with better proposals, innovative solutions, and pricing that defied logic. Find out who's behind Phoenix Development, he commanded his head of security. I want names, addresses, financial records. Nobody outsmarts Marcus Blackwell. He walked to his private elevator, passing walls lined with magazine covers featuring his face. Forbes, Fortune, Time, all celebrating the boy wonder who rebuilt American industry. Yet tonight, he'd return to his empty mansion, eat dinner alone, and fall asleep in a bed worth more than most people's homes. Marcus had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. But he convinced himself that success was the only currency worth having. After all, when you can purchase anything, why would you need anyone? The elevator descended toward the parking garage where his Lamborghini waited. Tomorrow, he'd destroy another family business. It was just another Tuesday in the life of Marcus Blackwell. But fate had other plans. 3,000 miles away in a cramped Los Angeles apartment, 19-year-old Annabella Rodriguez sat cross-legged on her worn carpet, laptop balanced on her knees, while 2-year-old Daniel slept peacefully in his crib nearby. The clock showed 2:47 a.m., but sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, coding the final algorithms that would secure another victory against Blackwell Industries. Phoenix Development, her masterpiece of deception, had just won a $40 million contract that Marcus had considered guaranteed. "Gotcha again," she whispered, uploading the files through multiple encrypted servers. Annabella's apartment told 2 stories. One corner held Daniel's toys, colorful books, and a makeshift play area where he spent his days laughing and learning. The other corner housed her war room. 3 monitors, servers humming quietly, and walls covered with Blackwell Industries organizational charts, financial reports, and strategic plans she'd acquired through perfectly legal but brilliantly executed corporate intelligence. She reached for a framed photograph on her desk. Her sister Carmen, radiant in a cap and gown at her business school graduation. Carmen had been Annabella's hero, the brilliant financial consultant who'd built her own firm from nothing, until Marcus Blackwell decided he wanted her client list. 6 months of legal warfare, frozen accounts, reputation destroyed. Carmen's business collapsed, and with it, her spirit. She'd moved back home to Mexico, broken and bitter, warning Annabella about the heartless billionaire who crushed dreams for entertainment. What Carmen never knew was that Annabella had met her destroyer at a Manhattan rooftop party 2 years ago. She'd been 17, fresh from high school, accompanying Carmen to a networking event. The man in the expensive suit had been charming, intelligent, magnetic. One perfect night that created the most precious thing in her life, Daniel. When she discovered the pregnancy, Annabella had also discovered Marcus's identity. The business magazines were full of his ruthless tactics, his cold dismissal of collateral damage, and his corporate conquests. She made a choice that would define everything. Disappear, raise Daniel alone, and methodically destroy the empire built on others' suffering. Now, as she watched her son sleep, Annabella felt the weight of her double life. By day, she was a teenage mother working multiple jobs to survive. By night, she was the anonymous genius systematically outmaneuvering the most powerful man in America. Marcus Blackwell had no idea that his greatest enemy was the mother of his child, and she intended to keep it that way until the moment she took everything he'd built. Tuesday morning started like any other for Marcus Blackwell. His driver waited outside the mansion at exactly 7:30 a.m., ready to transport him to another day of corporate dominance. But as Marcus slid into his Lamborghini's custom leather seats, the engine made a sound he'd never heard before, a grinding, mechanical death rattle. "What's happening?" Marcus demanded as smoke began rising from under the hood. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell. Looks like engine failure. I'll call for backup immediately." Marcus checked his watch. The Phoenix development situation required his immediate attention, and he had a board meeting in 45 minutes. "How long for another car?" "At least an hour in this traffic, sir." For the first time in years, Marcus Blackwell faced a problem money couldn't solve instantly. He stood on a street corner in East Los Angeles, a neighborhood he'd never seen despite living 20 minutes away. His $3,000 suit attracted curious stares from people heading to jobs that paid less than his daily allowance. "There's a bus stop right there," his driver suggested hesitantly. Marcus looked at the metal bench and faded route map with genuine confusion. "I don't understand." "Public transportation, sir. It's how most people travel." The concept felt foreign, almost insulting. Marcus Blackwell didn't ride buses. He owned companies that built cities where buses traveled. But as minutes ticked away and his empire demanded his presence, desperation overruled dignity. The approaching bus looked like a moving museum piece, dented, loud, filled with people Marcus had never bothered to notice existed. He climbed aboard, his Italian leather shoes hitting worn rubber flooring, his designer cologne mixing with cleaning solution and human exhaustion. Every seat held a story he'd never cared to read. The elderly woman clutching prescription bottles. The construction worker with calloused hands reviewing job applications. The teenage mother bouncing a crying baby, trying to soothe him while other passengers shot annoyed glances. Marcus found an empty seat and tried to ignore the chaos around him. This was temporary, an anomaly. Tomorrow, he'd be back in his climate-controlled vehicle, separated from the world he was accidentally experiencing. But the baby's cries grew louder, more desperate. Something about the sound triggered an unexpected response in Marcus. Not annoyance, but concern. He found himself turning to look at the young mother struggling to calm her child. What he saw would change everything. The crying child had the most striking blue eyes Marcus had ever seen, not because of their beauty, but because they were identical to his own. Bright, intense, and unmistakably Blackwell blue, the same shade that had stared back at him from mirrors his entire life. The toddler's hair held another impossible detail, a stubborn cowlick on the left side that had plagued Marcus since childhood, no amount of expensive styling able to tame it. But this child's cowlick seemed almost defiant, standing up despite his mother's gentle attempts to smooth it down. Marcus felt his world tilt. The expensive suit, the powerful meetings, the empire waiting for his attention. Everything faded in a background noise as he studied this child who looked like his own reflection 20 years ago. Is he all right? The words left Marcus's mouth before his brain approved them. The young mother looked up, and Marcus's second shock hit harder than the first. She was breathtaking. Luminous dark skin, intelligent eyes that held both strength and exhaustion, wearing a vibrant emerald dress that suggested careful attention to appearance despite obvious financial limitations. "He's just tired," she replied, her voice carrying an accent that hinted at educated origins. "We've been traveling since dawn." Marcus found himself moving closer, every instinct screaming that this encounter was more than coincidence. The child's cries had softened slightly, and those impossible blue eyes were now focused directly on Marcus with an intensity that felt like recognition. "May I?" Marcus gestured toward the child, surprising himself with the request. The mother hesitated, studying Marcus's face with growing confusion. Something flickered in her expression, not recognition exactly, but the unsettling feeling of déjà vu. "He doesn't usually like strangers," she warned, but something in Marcus's demeanor made her nod consent. The moment Marcus's hands touched the child, silence fell over their section of the bus. The toddler stopped crying instantly, tiny fingers reaching up to touch Marcus's face with startling familiarity. Marcus felt an emotion he couldn't name, protective, overwhelming, and absolutely certain. "What's his name?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Daniel," the mother replied, watching her son's unprecedented reaction to this well-dressed stranger. Marcus studied Daniel's face, counting similarities that defied coincidence. The nose, the chin, even the way the child tilted his head when concentrating. Everything reflected Marcus's own features, just miniaturized and innocent. "How old is he?" 2 years, 3 months. Marcus's hands began trembling as he held Daniel. 2 years, 3 months ago, he'd had one perfect night with a brilliant, beautiful woman whose name he'd never learned. A night he'd replayed in his memory more times than he cared to admit. The mother was studying Marcus's face now, her expression shifting from confusion to something approaching shock. Her eyes widened as recognition dawned, and Marcus saw the exact moment she realized who was holding her child. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're Marcus Blackwell." The bus seemed to freeze. Other passengers sensed the drama unfolding, but couldn't understand its magnitude. Marcus looked into the mother's eyes and saw not just recognition, but something far more dangerous: knowledge, anger, and the cold calculation of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "And you are?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer would destroy everything he thought he knew about his life. "I'm Annabella Rodriguez," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 2 years' worth of secrets. "Carmen Rodriguez was my sister." The name hit Marcus like physical force. Carmen Rodriguez, the financial consultant whose firm he'd acquired through hostile takeover 8 months ago. A brilliant woman who'd built her business from nothing, only to watch Marcus dismantle it piece by piece for her client list and market position. Marcus's memory filled with details he'd forgotten. Carmen had pleaded for negotiations, offered partnerships, even begged for time to relocate her employees. He dismissed every request with the cold efficiency that had built his empire. Business was business. Casualties were inevitable. "Carmen was your sister," Marcus repeated, understanding flooding through him like ice water. "My brilliant, kind, generous sister who worked 16-hour days to build something meaningful." Annabella's voice hardened with each word. "The sister who raised me after our parents died, who put herself through business school while working 3 jobs, who believed that hard work and integrity would be enough to succeed in America." Daniel had fallen asleep in Marcus's arms, peaceful and trusting, while the adults around him navigated the wreckage of their connected past. "Your hostile takeover didn't just destroy her business, Marcus. It destroyed her faith in everything she believed about fairness and justice." Carmen moved back to Mexico because she couldn't bear staying in a country where men like you crushed dreams for entertainment. Marcus felt the walls of his certainty crumbling. "I didn't know. You didn't care to know," Annabella interrupted. Carmen Rodriguez was just another obstacle to remove, another asset to acquire. You never bothered learning about the lives you were destroying. The bus continued its route while Marcus processed the impossible complexity of their situation. The child in his arms, his son, was the nephew of a woman whose life he'd methodically ruined. The mother of his child had watched him destroy her family's future while carrying the consequences of their one night together. That night in Manhattan, Marcus said slowly, "You knew who I was. I knew your name. I didn't know you were the monster who'd spent months terrorizing my sister." Annabella's eyes flashed with controlled fury. "Carmen never told me the details, just that some heartless billionaire had decided her success was inconvenient for his expansion plans." Marcus looked down at Daniel's sleeping face, seeing not just his own features, but the innocence he'd lost somewhere in his climb to power. This child represented everything Marcus had sacrificed for success: family, love, human connection. "When I discovered I was pregnant," Annabella continued, "I also discovered exactly who Marcus Blackwell really was. The magazines loved writing about your ruthless tactics, your complete lack of empathy for the collateral damage of your business deals. I realized I'd slept with the enemy, so you disappeared. I made a choice. I could let you know about Daniel and watch you try to control our lives with your money and power, or I could raise him away from your influence and build something better." Marcus felt the weight of judgment in her words, the careful calculation behind every decision she'd made. "You've been planning this confrontation." Annabella smiled, but it held no warmth. "Marcus, you have no idea what I've been planning. You think finding out about Daniel is the shocking revelation." She shifted closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "I'm Phoenix Development. For the past 6 months, I've been systematically outmaneuvering your empire, winning every contract you thought you deserved, building the foundation to take everything you've stolen from families like mine." The bus pulled to a stop, but Marcus couldn't move. The child in his arms, the woman beside him, the revelation that his greatest business rival was the teenage mother of his son. Everything he believed about control and power crumbled in an instant. "What do you want?" he asked. Annabella's smile grew colder. "Justice, and I'm about to take everything you own." The bus lurched to another stop, but neither Marcus nor Annabella moved. Daniel stirred slightly in Marcus's arms, completely unaware that his nap time was occurring during the most consequential conversation in his father's life. "Phoenix Development," Marcus repeated, his business mind racing through months of strategic defeats. "The innovative proposals, the impossible pricing, the employees who left my company for better opportunities. That was all you?" Annabella adjusted her emerald dress and sat back with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. "Every single victory. While you were busy crushing small businesses and celebrating your ruthless reputation, a 19-year-old girl was systematically dismantling your empire from a one-bedroom apartment." Marcus felt his understanding of reality shift completely. The anonymous competitor who'd been outwitting his Harvard-educated strategy team, his experienced executives, his billion-dollar consulting firms. She was sitting beside him in a public bus, having funded her war against him through part-time jobs and pure intellectual superiority. "The Morrison account. You knew exactly what our bid would be. Your head of acquisitions has terrible digital security. I've been reading your emails for 8 months." Annabella's smile held no apology. "Did you really think your corporate secrets were safe from someone who's been coding since she was 12? The magnitude of her deception was staggering. While Marcus had been searching for Phoenix Development's headquarters, tracking shell companies and false addresses, his greatest enemy had been changing Daniel's diapers and working night shifts to pay for rent. The Yamamoto contract. We were certain we had that deal locked. Your certainty was your weakness. You assumed you were competing against another corporate giant, so you played by those rules. I played by different rules entirely." Annabella's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd planned every move perfectly. While your team was focused on profit margins and market dominance, I was focused on actual innovation and client needs. Marcus looked down at Daniel, still sleeping peacefully, and felt the cosmic injustice of the situation. His own son's mother had been his anonymous nemesis, using her brilliant mind to systematically destroy everything Marcus had built to provide for their child's future. How many employees have you recruited away from Blackwell Industries? 47 of your best people. Turns out, when you offer them respect, creative freedom, and profit sharing instead of fear-based management, talented individuals prefer working for Phoenix Development. Annabella's eyes gleam with tactical pride. Your former head of innovation is particularly effective when he's not terrified of being fired for independent thinking. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. James Patterson, his most trusted strategist, had resigned 6 months ago, citing philosophical differences. Now Marcus understood. James hadn't found a better job. He joined the enemy army, led by the mother of Marcus's child. You've been building a counter-empire. I've been building what you should have built from the beginning. A company that creates value instead of destroying it. That lifts people up instead of crushing them down. Annabella's voice carried the moral authority of someone fighting for justice. Every contract Phoenix Development wins, every employee who chooses us over you, every innovation we create, it's all proof that success doesn't require brutality. Marcus stared out the bus window at the city he'd been conquering, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. Every building Blackwell Industries owned, every business he'd absorbed, every family displaced by his expansion, all of it built on the same ruthless calculation that had destroyed Carmen Rodriguez. What's your endgame, Annabella? You could have destroyed me months ago if you wanted. Annabella turned to face him directly, her expression combining the fierce protectiveness of motherhood with the cold calculation of a master strategist. My endgame isn't destruction, Marcus. It's transformation. I'm going to prove that everything you've built through fear and greed can be rebuilt through innovation and integrity. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And when I'm finished, Daniel will inherit a legacy he can be proud of, not an empire built on other people's pain. Marcus felt the bus's movement as a metaphor for his life. No longer in control of the direction, forced to trust someone else to determine his destination. Daniel had awakened and was studying Marcus's face with the focused intensity only toddlers possessed, tiny fingers exploring the unfamiliar features of his father. You want to transform my empire, Marcus said carefully. What exactly does that mean? Annabella reached into her small purse and withdrew a folded document. I've prepared a proposal. Phoenix Development merges with Blackwell Industries under very specific conditions. Marcus nearly laughed at the audacity. You're offering me a merger? You do realize I could have you investigated, discredited, destroyed within weeks. Could you? Annabella's confidence didn't waver. Because I've been preparing for this conversation for 2 years, Marcus, every email you've sent, every questionable business practice, every threat you've made to smaller companies, I have documented evidence of everything. The threat hit home because Marcus knew exactly what kind of evidence existed. Building an empire required making enemies, cutting corners, using leverage that existed in legal gray areas. He'd always assumed his power would protect him from consequences. Corporate espionage is still illegal, Annabella. So is market manipulation, predatory lending, and conspiracy to drive competitors out of business through illegal pricing schemes. She unfolded the document and handed it to him. I prefer to call it competitive intelligence gathering, which is perfectly legal when you're protecting yourself from monopolistic practices. Marcus scanned the proposal while Daniel played with his platinum cufflinks. The terms were breathtaking in their audacity. Complete restructuring of Blackwell Industries practices, profit sharing for all employees, ethical guidelines for acquisitions, and most shocking of all, Annabella Rodriguez as co-CEO. You're asking me to give you half my company. I'm offering to save your company from complete destruction. Annabella's voice carried the finality of someone who'd already considered every possible outcome. You have 2 choices, Marcus. Accept this partnership and transform Blackwell Industries into something that creates value instead of extracting it, or watch me destroy everything you've built over the next 6 months." Marcus looked around the bus at the people his business decisions had never considered. The working families, the small business owners, the individuals whose lives were affected by corporate policies made in boardrooms they'd never see. "And if I refuse, Phoenix Development goes public with everything. Your illegal practices, your market manipulation, your systematic destruction of family businesses." Annabella's smile held no mercy. "I'll make sure every employee you've mistreated, every competitor you've crushed, every family whose dreams you've destroyed gets their day in court." Daniel had somehow managed to remove one of Marcus's cufflinks and was examining it with scientific curiosity. The platinum accessory, worth more than most people's monthly rent, had become a toy for the child who represented everything Marcus had sacrificed for material success. "How long do I have to decide?" Annabella checked her phone. 72 hours. After that, Phoenix Development begins its final campaign against Blackwell Industries. Marcus realized he was holding his son while receiving an ultimatum from the most dangerous opponent he'd ever faced. A teenage mother who'd outmaneuvered his entire corporate machine while working part-time jobs and raising a child alone. "And if I accept your terms, then Daniel grows up with a father he can respect, and you discover what it feels like to build something that actually matters." Marcus's phone buzzed with urgent messages as the bus approached downtown. His board meeting had started without him. Stock prices were fluctuating, and 3 major deals hung in the balance while he sat holding his son and processing the most significant ultimatum of his life. "I need to get to my office," Marcus said, standing carefully while balancing Daniel. "This conversation isn't over." Annabella gathered her belongings with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to managing multiple priorities. "I didn't expect it to be. You'll need time to process what losing control actually feels like." Marcus stepped off the bus into familiar territory. Downtown's financial district where Blackwell Industries headquarters cast shadows over smaller buildings. But everything felt different now. The corporate fortress he'd built suddenly seemed less like a monument to success and more like a prison constructed from other people's defeated dreams. "Daniel needs to come with me," Marcus said, surprising himself with the possessive tone. "Daniel has a pediatric appointment," Annabella replied firmly. "His health comes before your corporate emergencies." Marcus realized he knew nothing about his son's medical needs, daily routine, or basic care requirements. 2 years of development had occurred without his knowledge or input, and now he was demanding immediate access like another business acquisition. They walked toward the medical complex, an unlikely family unit that drew curious stares. Marcus in his expensive suit carrying a toddler. Annabella in her carefully chosen dress, projecting dignity despite obvious financial limitations, and Daniel contentedly exploring his father's face while pedestrians navigated around them. Then Daniel's demeanor changed. His cheerful babbling stopped, replaced by whimpering that quickly escalated to distressed crying. His forehead felt warm against Marcus's palm, and his normally bright eyes appeared glassy and unfocused. "He's burning up," Marcus said, panic creeping into his voice. Annabella touched Daniel's face, and her calm facade cracked. "This isn't normal." His temperature spiked too fast. Daniel's crying became weaker, more concerning than loud protests. His small body went limp in Marcus's arms, and for a terrifying moment, his eyes rolled back slightly. "We need a hospital now." Marcus's corporate authority kicked in automatically. "My driver." "The children's emergency room is 6 blocks away," Annabella interrupted, already moving. "Faster than waiting for your car in this traffic." Marcus found himself running through downtown streets in a $3,000 suit, holding his desperately ill son while following a 19-year-old woman who knew exactly where to go and what to do. Every step reminded him how completely unprepared he was for actual parenting, how his wealth and power meant nothing when faced with a child's medical emergency. The emergency room was chaos. Overwhelmed staff, crying children, worried families waiting for attention. Marcus's impulse was to demand immediate service, to use his influence and resources to bypass the system. But Annabella was already speaking with triage nurses, providing Daniel's medical history and insurance information Marcus didn't even know existed. "How long has he been running fever?" the nurse asked. "He was fine this morning," Annabella replied, her voice tight with controlled fear. The temperature spiked within the last 30 minutes. Marcus watched Annabella handle the crisis with competence he couldn't match. She knew Daniel's allergies, his vaccination schedule, his pediatrician's name, his previous medical episodes. Marcus knew his son's exact resemblance to his own childhood photos, but nothing about keeping him healthy and safe. "Are you the father?" the nurse asked Marcus. "Yes," Marcus said, the word carrying more weight than any business contract he'd ever signed. "We'll need both parents to sign consent forms if treatment is required." Marcus looked at Annabella, realizing that their personal conflict had become secondary to their shared responsibility. Whatever ultimatums and corporate warfare existed between them, their son needed both of them right now. Daniel's fever continued climbing, and Marcus discovered that all his wealth couldn't make a sick child recover faster or protect the people he loved from life's fundamental uncertainties. The pediatric intensive care unit hummed with machines monitoring Daniel's vital signs, while Marcus and Annabella maintained a vigil that stretched into its 8th hour. The diagnosis was severe, a rare viral infection that could cause complications if not carefully managed. Daniel lay connected to 4 tubes and monitoring equipment, looking impossibly small in the hospital bed. Marcus had removed his suit jacket hours ago, his expensive shirt wrinkled from holding Daniel during the worst moments of fever-induced delirium. Annabella sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, still wearing her emerald dress, but having abandoned any pretense of formal composure. "His fever broke 20 minutes ago," the nurse reported during her hourly check. "We're cautiously optimistic, but he'll need to stay for observation." Marcus felt relief flood through him like physical warmth. The terror of potentially losing Daniel before truly knowing him had been unbearable. How long? At least 48 hours. Children can relapse quickly with this particular virus. After the nurse left, Marcus and Annabella sat in silence, broken only by the reassuring beep of monitoring equipment. The corporate ultimatum that had dominated their buzz conversation seemed insignificant compared to their shared fear for Daniel's life. "I've never been this frightened," Marcus admitted. Annabella looked at him with something approaching sympathy. "Welcome to parenthood. The terror never really goes away. You just learn to function despite it." Marcus studied his son's peaceful face, finally stable after hours of distress. "How do you do this alone? The constant worry, the responsibility, the what-ifs that keep you awake at night. You do it because you have to, because someone depends on you completely, and their needs matter more than your fears." Annabella's voice carried the wisdom of someone who'd been tested by circumstances Marcus had never faced. Money can't protect them from everything, but love makes you strong enough to handle whatever comes. Marcus's phone had been buzzing continuously with corporate emergencies. Board members demanding his presence, deals collapsing without his attention, stock prices reacting to his unexplained absence. For the first time in his professional life, Marcus ignored every call. "Your empire is falling apart without you," Annabella observed. "Let it fall," Marcus said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Daniel is more important than any deal." Annabella studied Marcus's face as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "That's the first thing you've said that sounds like the man I met 2 years ago." Marcus remembered that night differently now, not as a casual encounter, but as a glimpse of who he could have been if he'd chosen love over ambition. The young woman who challenged his thinking about economics and ethics, who'd made him laugh and forget about corporate strategy for a few precious hours. "I used to be different," Marcus said quietly. "People can change back," Annabella replied. "But it requires giving up the things that changed them in the first place." Daniel stirred slightly, and both parents leaned forward instinctively. His eyes opened briefly, unfocused but peaceful, before closing again in natural sleep rather than fever-induced unconsciousness. "He's going to be okay," Marcus whispered, reaching out to touch Daniel's small hand. "We're going to make sure he's okay," Annabella corrected, Marcus realized she'd said we for the first time since their confrontation began. The corporate warfare between them had ended, but their shared commitment to Daniel had created common ground neither had expected to find. Marcus woke up in a hospital chair to find 3 photographers outside Daniel's room, and his phone flooded with calls from his public relations team. Somehow, despite his best efforts to maintain privacy, the media had discovered Blackwell Industries CEO spending the night in a pediatric ward with an unknown child in Newport. Mr. Blackwell, can you confirm reports about your secret family? A reporter called through the window. Annabella was already awake, holding Daniel, who'd recovered enough to sit up and take notice of the commotion outside his room. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Marcus's assistant appeared at the door, looking frazzled. Sir, we need to discuss damage control immediately. The board is demanding explanations, and stock prices opened down 12%. Get security to clear the hallway. Marcus ordered. My son doesn't need cameras and questions while he's recovering. The word son, spoken aloud in front of witnesses, marked a point of no return. Within hours, the story would be everywhere. The ruthless billionaire's secret child, the teenage mother, the dramatic hospital vigil that had kept Marcus away from crucial business meetings. Annabella's phone was ringing constantly with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, she explained, declining another call. They've already found my apartment. My work address is probably my entire history. Marcus felt the weight of consequences he'd never considered. His corporate battles had always been fought in boardrooms and legal offices, away from public scrutiny. But having a child changed everything. Daniel's privacy, Annabella's safety, their ability to navigate their complex relationship without external pressure. Phoenix Development's identity is going to come out, Annabella said, bouncing Daniel gently as he fussed at the unfamiliar activity outside his room. Once they start investigating me, they'll connect all the pieces. Marcus realized the full scope of their exposure. The media would discover not just his secret son, but the fact that his greatest business rival was the child's mother. The story would write itself, corporate titan outwitted by teenage mothers seeking revenge for family's destruction. Your ultimatum just became public, Marcus said, which means you can't dismiss it as easily. Every decision you make now gets scrutinized by reporters looking for the next chapter in this story. Annabella's strategic mind was already adapting to their new reality. The question is whether you want them writing about your redemption or your downfall. Daniel had recovered enough to show interest in the bright camera flashes outside, pointing at the lights with childlike curiosity. He had no understanding that his existence had just become the most significant business story of the year. Marcus looked at his son, then at Annabella, then at the chaos their revelation had created. The private conversation about corporate transformation had become a public referendum on his character. What do we tell them? Marcus asked. We tell them the truth, Annabella replied. All of it. 3 days after the bus confrontation, Marcus sat in his boardroom watching his empire crumble in real time. The hostile takeover by Meridian Capital had gained momentum with surgical precision, targeting every weakness in Blackwell Industries structure. They've acquired 37% of our stock, his CFO announced grimly. At this rate, they'll have controlling interest by Friday. Marcus studied the takeover documents, recognizing the brilliant strategy behind Meridian's assault. Someone had provided them with insider knowledge of Blackwell Industries' vulnerabilities, information that should have been impossible to obtain. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meridian Capital is using my research. They're not just taking your company, they're dismantling it exactly the way you dismantle Carmen's firm. Marcus felt the irony like a physical blow. Annabella had weaponized his own tactics against him, providing his enemies with the intelligence needed to destroy him completely. Sir, there's someone here to see you, his assistant announced. Annabella walked into the boardroom, carrying Daniel, her presence commanding despite her modest appearance. She wore a simple black dress that somehow made her look more formidable than his power suits made him feel. Hello, "Marcus," she said calmly, "I thought you might want to discuss terms." The board members exchanged confused glances as Marcus struggled to maintain his composure. "What terms?" "I have information that could stop Meridian Capital's takeover. Financial records, strategic plans, evidence of their illegal market manipulation tactics that would interest federal investigators." Marcus's pulse quickened. "What do you want in return?" "Partnership. Equal partnership in Blackwell Industries, with immediate implementation of ethical business practices. No more hostile takeovers. No more destroying family businesses. No more treating human beings as disposable assets." Daniel reached toward Marcus from his mother's arms, and Marcus felt the familiar surge of protective instinct. This child represented everything he'd never known he wanted: family, legacy, love that couldn't be purchased. "You're asking me to fundamentally change everything I've built," Marcus said. "I'm offering you the chance to build something better," Annabella replied. "Something Daniel can be proud of when he's old enough to understand what his father does for a living." Marcus looked around the boardroom at his executives, men who'd helped him conquer markets and crush competitors. Then he looked at his son, innocent and trusting, and realized which legacy mattered more. "Show me your evidence," he said. Annabella placed a flash drive on the conference table. "Meridian Capital has been engaging in securities fraud, market manipulation, and bribery. This contains proof of their crimes, including recorded conversations with corrupt officials." "How did you get this?" "The same way I've been getting everything else, by being smarter than the people who underestimate me." Annabella's eyes held steel. "But I'm not giving you this information to save your empire, Marcus. I'm giving it to you to save Daniel's future. If Meridian Capital succeeds, they'll asset strip the company and destroy thousands of jobs. Your son will inherit nothing but the ruins of what you built." Marcus realized the impossible position she created. She could save his company, but only if he surrendered the very principles that had built it. Reform or destruction, there was no middle ground. "If I agree to your terms," Marcus said slowly, "how do I know you won't just take control and destroy everything anyway?" "Because unlike you, I don't build my success on other people's suffering," Annabella replied. "I want to create something better. For Daniel, for the employees, for everyone who depends on this company for their livelihood." Marcus felt the weight of genuine responsibility for the first time in his life. Not just responsibility for profits and growth, but for the human cost of his ambition. "Equal partnership," he said, "but I want legal guarantees that you won't use Phoenix Development to compete against us. Phoenix Development ceases to exist the moment we shake hands," Annabella said. "Partners don't compete against each other, they build together." Marcus extended his hand, knowing he was surrendering more than control. He was surrendering the identity that had defined him since his father's death. "Welcome to Blackwell Industries, partner," he said. As their hands met, Daniel clapped his tiny hands together, as if celebrating his parents' first step towards something resembling a family. The emergency board meeting convened at 6 a.m., every director present despite the unusual hour. Marcus stood at the head of the table with Annabella beside him, Daniel content in his father's arms, while corporate titans struggled to process the surreal scene. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Annabella Rodriguez, my new partner and the mother of my son," Marcus announced, his voice carrying none of its usual arrogance. Board member Harrison Webb, a 60-year veteran of corporate warfare, leaned forward skeptically. "Marcus, this is highly irregular. We're facing a hostile takeover, and you're introducing personal relationships into boardroom strategy." "This isn't about personal relationships," Marcus replied. "This is about survival. Annabella has evidence that will destroy Meridian Capital's takeover attempt." Annabella activated the room's presentation system, displaying financial documents that made several board members straighten in their chairs. Meridian Capital has been manipulating stock prices through shell companies, bribing regulatory officials, and engaging in securities fraud. This takeover isn't just hostile, it's criminal. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded phone conversations, financial transfers, documented bribes that painted Meridian Capital as a criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business. How did you acquire this information? Webb demanded. Through legal intelligence gathering and ethical hacking techniques, Annabella replied calmly. Everything was obtained without breaking any laws, unlike Meridian's approach to business. Marcus watched his board members process the implications. These men had built their careers on aggressive tactics, but outright criminality crossed lines even they wouldn't cross. If we present this evidence to federal authorities, Marcus said, Meridian Capital will face criminal charges. Their takeover attempt will collapse, and their stock will become worthless. What's the catch? Webb asked, his experience detecting hidden agendas. Blackwell Industries restructures immediately, Marcus announced. No more hostile takeovers. No more destroying family businesses. We compete through innovation and superior service, not through crushing competitors. The boardroom erupted in protests. These men had profited enormously from Marcus's ruthless tactics, and ethical business practices threatened their financial expectations. You're talking about abandoning everything that made this company successful, Webb argued. I'm talking about building something sustainable, Marcus replied. Something that doesn't depend on causing suffering for profit. Annabella stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. This company employs 47,000 people. Meridian Capital plans to eliminate 60% of those jobs through automation and outsourcing. Your choice isn't between ethical and unethical business practices. It's between having a company to run or watching it get dismantled by criminals. The room fell silent as the board members absorbed this reality. Marcus could see the calculations in their minds, weighing immediate profits against long-term survival, all in favor of accepting Ms. Rodriguez as equal partner and implementing immediate ethical business practices. Marcus called for the vote. Hands rose around the table, not enthusiastically, but with the resignation of men who recognize necessity. Motion carries, Marcus announced. Annabella, would you like to make the call to federal authorities? As Annabella dialed the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Marcus felt something he'd never experienced before. Pride that wasn't built on someone else's defeat. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something instead of against someone. Daniel babbled happily in his arms, and Marcus wondered if his son would grow up remembering this moment when his father chose justice over profit. 6 weeks later, Blackwell Rodriguez Industries occupied the same glass tower, but everything else had changed. The executive floor buzzed with genuine collaboration instead of competitive tension. The company's stock had reached record highs as investors responded to their new ethical approach. Marcus stood in his office, now shared with Annabella, watching her conduct a video conference with environmental engineers about their latest renewable energy project. She wore a tailored navy suit that commanded respect while maintaining her natural grace, and her presentation skills rivaled those of executives twice her age. The solar panel installation would create 300 permanent jobs, she explained to the city council representatives in the spring. We're not just building sustainable energy, we're building sustainable communities. When the call ended, Marcus approached her desk. The Portland project is officially approved. Full environmental compliance, union labor agreements, and profit sharing with the local community. Good, Annabella replied, not looking up from her financial projections. Ethical business practices are proving more profitable than your old methods ever. Marcus smiled at the gentle insult. Hard to argue with a 30% increase in stock value. That's what happens when employees actually want to work for you instead of just collecting paychecks while planning their escape, Annabella said. Happy workers are productive workers. Daniel played contentedly in the corner of the office, his toys scattered across a colorful play area that had replaced Marcus's cold, minimalist decor. The sight of his son building blocks while his parents built a business empire filled Marcus with satisfaction he'd never found in conquest. I have something for you, Marcus said, producing an envelope from his desk drawer. Annabella opened it to find legal documents transferring ownership of Marcus's mansion to a foundation for homeless families. Marcus, this is worth $12 million. It's worth more as housing for people who need it than as a monument to my ego, Marcus replied. "I bought a smaller place closer to Daniel's school, somewhere that feels like home instead of a museum." Annabella looked at him with something approaching affection. "You're not the same man who destroyed my sister's business." "I'm trying not to be," Marcus said, "though I still think about the families I hurt building this empire. Carmen deserved better than what I did to her." "Carmen called me yesterday," Annabella said quietly. "She's considering moving back to Los Angeles. She wants to meet Daniel, and she's curious about the man who's been sending anonymous donations to displaced business owners." Marcus felt a flutter of hope. Would she consider working with us? "We need someone with her expertise in ethical consulting." "I think she'd be willing to discuss it," Annabella said. "But you'll have to apologize in person. And mean it." "I do mean it," Marcus said, realizing how much he'd changed. "I want to make things right." Annabella stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. "We're building something good here, Marcus. Something Daniel can be proud of." "We're building something together," Marcus corrected, and for the first time in his life, partnership felt stronger than control. The annual shareholders meeting had never been a public spectacle before, but Marcus had insisted on transparency. 300 investors, employees, and community leaders filled the hotel ballroom, curious about the dramatic changes at Blackwell Rodriguez Industries. Marcus stood at the podium, no longer the arrogant young billionaire who'd built his reputation on crushing competitors. Beside him, Annabella held Daniel, both of them representing the family he'd never known he needed. 18 months ago, I believe success meant accumulating more power than everyone else, Marcus began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I measured my worth by the size of my empire and the fear I inspired in my competitors." He paused, looking at Daniel, who was playing with a toy car while completely unaware of the corporate theater surrounding him. "Then I discovered I had a son, not through lawyers or private investigators, but by pure chance on a public bus. In that moment, I realized that everything I'd built meant nothing if I couldn't look my child in the eye and feel proud of who I'd become." The audience listened with rapt attention as Marcus continued. "The woman beside me didn't reveal our son's existence to gain access to my wealth. She hid him from me because she knew the kind of man I was, someone who destroyed families for profit, who treated human beings as obstacles to remove." Marcus's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "Annabella Rodriguez is the most brilliant strategist I've ever encountered. She single-handedly outmaneuvered my entire corporate structure, not for personal gain, but to seek justice for the families I'd harmed. She taught me that true strength isn't about overpowering others, it's about lifting them up." He gestured to the financial projections displayed on screens around the room. "Since implementing ethical business practices, our company has grown faster than ever before. We've created more jobs, generated higher profits, and built stronger communities. Compassion isn't weakness, it's the foundation of sustainable success." An investor in the front row raised his hand. "What guarantee do we have that this transformation is permanent?" Marcus exchanged a look with Annabella, who nodded encouragingly. "Because I'm making a public commitment today. I'm transferring 60% of my personal holdings to a foundation that will provide business loans to entrepreneurs from underserved communities. I'm ensuring that my legacy isn't about what I took, but what I gave." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. This wasn't typical corporate behavior. Billionaires didn't voluntarily redistribute their wealth. Furthermore, Marcus continued, "I'm proposing a constitutional amendment to our corporate charter. Any future business practices that harm communities or exploit workers will require unanimous board approval and public transparency. We're legally binding ourselves to ethical standards." Annabella stepped forward, shifting Daniel to her hip. Marcus isn't just changing his business practices. He's changing his life. He's learning to be a father, a partner, and a responsible member of society. "The man who destroyed my sister's business wouldn't have the courage to admit his mistakes publicly. Which brings me to my final announcement," Marcus said, his heart pounding with nervousness he hadn't felt since childhood. "Annabella Rodriguez, will you marry me?" The question hung in the air as 300 people held their breath. Daniel clapped his hands, sensing the importance Ask me again in 6 months, she said with a smile. When you've proven this transformation is real and permanent. The audience applauded as Marcus realized that he just received the most hopeful rejection of his life. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the same boardroom where he had once plotted corporate conquests, but now he was reviewing plans for the Blackwell Rodriguez Foundation's latest project, a business incubator for immigrant entrepreneurs. The program has a 93% success rate. Annabella reported. We funded over 200 startups, creating more than 3,000 jobs. Daniel, now 3 years old, sat at the conference table with his own toy laptop, mimicking his parents' work with the seriousness only a toddler can manage. He'd grown into a confident child who called Marcus Daddy and treated the office as his personal playground. The foundation has received applications from Carmen's former employees. Annabella continued. They want to restart their consulting practices with our microloans. Marcus felt the familiar warmth of redemption. Carmen had returned to Los Angeles and accepted his apology, though their relationship remained professionally cordial rather than personally warm. She now headed the foundation's ethical business review board, ensuring that funded companies met strict moral standards. Any other business? Marcus asked the board. Just one item, Annabella said, standing and moving to the window. I have an announcement. She turned to face the room, her hand resting on her stomach. Blackwell Rodriguez Industries is about to welcome its next generation of leadership. Marcus felt his world shift again, but this time toward joy instead of chaos. Are you saying? I'm saying Daniel is going to be a big brother, Annabella said, her smile brighter than he'd ever seen it. Marcus crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, not caring that the entire board was watching. This is the best hostile takeover I've ever experienced. This isn't a takeover, Annabella laughed. This is a merger. Daniel looked up from his toy laptop and announced, Daddy, I want a sister. We'll see what we can do, Marcus said, lifting his son while keeping one arm around Annabella. Later that evening, as they walked through the community center the foundation had built, Marcus reflected on the journey from destroyer to creator. The buildings around them housed small businesses, job training programs, and childcare facilities, all funded by money that had once been used to crush dreams. Do you think we're actually changing the world? Marcus asked Annabella. We're changing our corner of it, she replied, and teaching our children that success means making life better for others, not just ourselves. Marcus looked at his family, his brilliant partner, his curious son, and the child growing in Annabella's belly, and realized he'd finally built an empire worth inheriting.